Throughout different eras of football, we've seen players take to alcohol in a way that affected their relationships with everyone and their performances on the pitch. Ironically, some of the best players of all time partied hard and were literally drunk all the time. And while we've come a long way since the 1980s and 1990s, when players sometimes drank before big fixtures, it's probably a good time to talk about some of these guys, because it appears that even with their bad habits, alcohol didn't seem to slow some of them down, at least on the pitch. These are some of the biggest drinkers in football history. Former Arsenal and England midfielder Paul Merson battled alcoholism, drug addiction, and also gambling addiction during a roller coaster career. It got so bad that the FA put him through therapy. Merson recently admitted that although he was an alcoholic, it never caused him to miss a day off of training. Sometimes he would go to training sessions in the morning straight from the nightclub. For older fans, Merson was a major part of their football obsession in the late 80s. Merson spent 11 seasons with the Gunners, bringing flair and creativity to the midfield before moving on to Middlesbrough, Aston Villa, and Portsmouth. But during that period, he lost about £7 million to gambling and was part of the fabled Tuesday Club, a group known for their notorious drinking sessions at Arsenal in the 90s. One time, Merson was sent home from an Arsenal tour because he had a lot of drinking sessions under his belt. In Merson's words, "When I didn't drink, I was alright. One was too many and 100 was not enough. I was a functional drunk and compulsive gambler." Merson downed 35 pints a week and eventually saw his life implode in divorce and drink-driving convictions. The former midfielder would eventually win the battle and is many years into his recovery. But unfortunately, this next player couldn't quite do so. The late George Best fought a long battle with alcoholism that began in his playing days. Best was undoubtedly among the greatest players ever, and arguably the first ever footballing celebrity. Best had a meteoric rise, making his first team debut at 17, before playing a huge role in helping United to 2 league titles and a European Cup by the age of 22. Best also claimed the Ballon d'Or, becoming the youngest ever Footballer of the Year winner in the process. The Northern Irish legend, however, saw a rapid decline in his mid-20s, which eventually led to an acrimonious departure from United at the age of 27. After that, he spent the next decade as a journeyman. Many fans feel that Best's rapid decline was due to his alcohol problems, but a few others believe that his perfectionist mentality saw him resort to alcohol as a coping mechanism. Best was diagnosed with severe liver damage in 2000 and would eventually need a liver transplant in 2002. He, however, continued with the drinking and finally lost the battle at the age of 59 in 2005. But this next player took drinking to a whole new level. "I will always be an alcoholic." Those are the words of Paul Gascoigne, arguably the most gifted English footballer of his generation. Many fans already know about Paul Gascoigne's troubles with alcohol because they have been well documented. In his book Gaza, My Story, Gascoigne admitted battling with alcoholism for much of his career. But it wasn't just the alcohol. This guy also had lots of binge eating sessions, gambling, and even took recreational drugs. Throughout his career, Gaza has suffered from mental health problems, and there have been multiple suicide attempts. In 1998, he drank 32 shots of whiskey, which left him unconscious. Unfortunately for Gaza, his problems got worse since his retirement almost 2 decades ago. Gaza has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, ADHD, OCD, and depression, and has been taken into protective custody several times to prevent self-harm. He has also been arrested for drunk driving and possession of cocaine on multiple occasions. Although Gaza has made numerous attempts at rehab, more than a dozen times, the battle is far from over. In a recent interview, Gaza revealed that he has no home and is living in the spare room of his agent's house due to financial troubles. But for Andy Carroll, when you see headlines like this, it probably gives you an idea of the player that Andy Carroll was in the Premier League. Now plying his trade with League Two side Amiens, the 35-year-old's reputation precedes him. From smashing glass in a man's face to being involved in numerous fights and then getting into trouble for being high on the pitch, Andy Carroll's career is a story of what could have been. Andy Carroll expresses regret over his reputation of being known as a big drinker early in his football career at Newcastle and believes it might have contributed to the alarming number of injuries he suffered throughout his career. As a striker, Carroll was once compared to legends like Alan Shearer and Didier Drogba. He had the strength, shot, and excellent aerial ability, but his best days are way behind him. Switching gears, let's see some legends who were able to turn their lives around. Greaves is the highest goal scorer in the history of English top-flight football with 357 goals. But despite banging goals for fun, Greaves fought a very public battle with alcoholism in the 1970s. In January 1971, the former striker notoriously drank 12 lagers in a club before an FA Cup tie, which his team ended up losing 4-0. Greaves was one heck of a player at Chelsea and Tottenham, as you could bet your last penny that he would find the back of the net. But by the time he arrived at West Ham, the goals had begun to dry up, and drinking had now formed a large part of his life. At this point, he was drinking 20 pints of lager during the day and consuming a bottle of vodka in the evening. Towards the end of the 70s, Greaves was able to quit for good and become sober for the rest of his life until he passed away at the age of 81 in 2021. Arsenal legend Tony Adams struggled with alcoholism until the latter end of his career, admitting that he spent more time in the pub than on the training pitch. On more than 3 occasions, Adams took to the field drunk, one of them being a man-of-the-match performance against Sheffield United. What in the world? For years as a top defender for both the Gunners and the Three Lions, Adam was often caught up in many bar fights and other troubles off the pitch. In 1990, he got sentenced to 4 months in prison for drunk driving, and many fans feared that his drinking habits were only going to get worse. That was until he flipped the switch in 1996 and started to fight alcoholism, and this coincided with the arrival of the legendary Arsene Wenger. Adams has long built an addiction and recovery facility for sportsmen, but this next player needs no introduction. Wayne Rooney has since opened up about how he resorted to booze to help him cope with the pressures of fame in his 20s. In Rooney's words, "My release was alcohol when I was in my early 20s. I drank almost until I'd pass out. I didn't want to be around people because sometimes you feel embarrassed. You feel like you've let people down, and ultimately I didn't know how else to deal with it." Rooney's alcohol problems led to issues in his marriage, as confirmed by his wife Colleen in her autobiography. On the pitch, he also saw a slow decline in his game and performance as he struggled with his eating habits. But despite gulping down bevies at any available opportunity, Rooney will always be remembered for his remarkable achievements at Manchester United on the club and individual level. We probably could say the same thing about one of Rooney's teammates. Ferdinand admitted to overindulging in alcohol throughout periods in his career. The former defender revealed that as a young player, he spent the whole day drinking. "I could drink 10 pints and then switch to vodka." Before a match against Arsenal in the 1996 and 97 season, Ferdinand had 3 brandies before coming on. As he grew older, Ferdinand got some control over his alcohol habits, but turned to alcohol again in 2015 when his late wife Rebecca passed away in May 2015 following a long battle with breast cancer, leaving him to raise their 3 kids alone. Moving on to yet another Manchester United legend. Paul McGrath's battle with alcoholism led to a difficult relationship with Sir Alex Ferguson, who was at the start of his Manchester United career. The former defender subsequently moved on to Aston Villa, where he had some of the best years of his career, winning the PFA Player of the Year award in his first season after leaving Old Trafford. McGrath battled chronic knee problems and many personal problems for most of his career. However, he still performed at the highest level when he was healthy. His book, Back from the Brink, tells the story of a career that was almost ended by alcohol. With an increasing fear of the limelight, McGrath consumed more alcohol on a more regular basis and often turned up to training drunk or playing important matches while under the influence of alcohol. Last on our list is a certain player whom Pelé wished had been born Brazilian. Jim Baxter is widely regarded as one of Scotland's greatest ever players. His unhurried artistry on the ball often saw him control the game as a left half during the 60s. However, Baxter would admit to drinking 3 bottles of spirits a day and gambling the profits away. His unhealthy drinking habits eventually led him to the Edinburgh Royal Infirmary liver transplant unit in the summer of 1994. Having gotten a second chance in life, Baxter was grateful but continued drinking again until his death from pancreatic cancer in 2001.